Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Raker, your host for this edition of the program. Our guest today is Amy Miller, founder of Our Family Encounter. And a disclaimer up front, Amy is not related in any way to Alan Miller, the founder and producer of our program Access to Democracy. And Amy is a returning guest, so welcome back, Amy.
Thank you so much for inviting me back.
It's a pleasure to have you. You know, when you were here before, we started our discussion about what our family encounter is. So maybe if you would refresh us a little bit about what that's all about, what the mission is, and then we will get into some of the interworkings of what it is that you do to help families start that conversation.
Absolutely. One of the things I find as people get older is they're not taking the time to document their wishes. And when our first conversation, we shared why that's so important. But also it's, once you document your wishes, how do you share those wishes with others? And having that conversation where we come alongside rather than, the reason why I call it Our Family Encounter, a lot of times when you hear that word encounter, actually if you look it up in the dictionary, it means to be in conflict. And instead, I've kind of like twisted it and said, well, maybe it's about coming alongside. So having a chance to go, this is what's important to me, and having others understand, this is how I can honor you, especially when we're talking about the conversation of aging and of passing away and leaving a legacy.
So part of your mission is to help people understand and to help people get started about having a conversation about important things in their lives before those things happen. So how do you orchestrate that?
One of the very most important decisions anyone has to make, and honestly, it starts at the age of 18, so it's not always, for your parents, is who can speak for you if you cannot speak for yourself? And that can be a very difficult choice, or maybe it's very obvious. For married couples, well, it might be my partner. For parents, they assume it's for they will always have the ability to make decisions for their children, and likewise for children, they always expect mom and dad are going to pick them to make decisions for them when they get old, but they don't have to. You have the option of picking a third party to make some of these decisions, and maybe that's the most appropriate. Or if you don't have any immediate family, or you're estranged from them, you may want to go with a third party. But I don't believe people understand or realize the importance of having these decisions made soon enough on who can speak for them. And it's not, and everyone just says, okay, we think of power of attorney or living will or those terms. You should have one person do your financial and legal so they can sign contracts and those decisions. Another one is for health care. And then also who's going to close out your estate, whether it's a administrator, a trustee, or your executor. So there's 3 roles that need to have someone decide who can speak for you or who can carry out your wishes.
So those are some examples that you cited about the kinds of conversations and the kinds of decisions that families, people need to think about before there's some kind of crisis that occurs in their life and they're not prepared to deal with that crisis.
Right. And oftentimes people don't realize they need to have it as early, really, as they should. For example, how many parents don't realize their 18-year-old does not need to contact them, or there's no conversation at all about an 18-year-old's doctor's appointment. Likewise, maybe even with a newborn or a young child, what do you need to know if your children get sick, and what happens when let's say it's in the hospital? Or what decisions can you make, let's say at the age of 13? There's a conversation that's happening about where do parents have that right to make decisions. And likewise, also all the way at the end of life. You could be 114 and go, okay, who can speak for me if I'm having to make these final decisions for my life? So age isn't the issue, but the issue is starting early enough.
So our theme is starting that important conversation. And you've described a little bit about how that conversation should take place or when it should take place. But those topics are often difficult for people to bring up and to have a conversation about. In your work, do you have some examples, some guidelines about how people can start those conversations and have them turn into a productive discussion?
Absolutely. And this time of year, between the holidays, is a great time to start noticing what's happening. And some families haven't seen each other for maybe a couple years or in several months. And you might see, they're repeating themselves, or they are, not so steady on their feet. Or you might even notice that the steps in their house, or maybe the sidewalk, has a little lip on it, and you're saying, okay, maybe is there a way that you can identify that so you don't accidentally trip on that step? So it's like you would probably any conversation, but sometimes family members go, oh, I think that's a silly idea. For, an example is a friend of mine tried to have that step conversation. They have these, I think you can find these strips that will indicate like a different color, and that's actually one of the things they recommend is to, right at the edge of a step, either take spray paint or put a sticker down or something to indicate there's a change in elevation. People don't realize that that's a really simple solution to possibly avoiding a trip or fall, which the older you get, that can have some serious ramifications. So, but people are like, that's a crazy idea. Why would I want to do that? Or whoever says, what the reason why.
Well, I'm not going to fool with that. I'm not going to worry about that. Right?
Yeah, if you can't see it, that's on you. So sometimes it's as simple as saying, I'm seeing some behaviors, and should we find ways to mitigate those behaviors or just conversations? Sometimes it's, and the children are like, oh no, you're never gonna die. You're never gonna be in that space. I can't handle that. And the reason for that is usually high anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what would happen? I have no idea what would happen. So a lot of times I like to actually start with, what decisions do you need to make so you have an answer? But now adult children, they're in a different situation. I'm finding when I'm talking to families is the adult children don't know where to start. They don't almost know what the questions are that they need to ask. So they might be, they might actually say, well, what about my inheritance? And that's where they go, and it's like going, okay, that's not what this is about. Sure. But that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. And instead of, and then they have a moment to kind of sit and think and go, no, it's about the love and the care for my loved ones. How can I support them? Or or what are they going to need from me. It's kind of getting over that first hump of what do I have to adjust my life for, to getting to that stage where we're thinking, what will you need and how can I help you? So it's kind of changing the perspective of what do you want to accomplish in that conversation. One of the things I like to recommend, especially for adult children, is to go to mom, dad, older family members, and especially if they haven't, let's say, had the conversation with an attorney or the financial planner, is just say, how would you handle this question? One of my favorite questions is, if you can't live at home, where would you live?
That's a good one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and people, why wouldn't I be able to live at home? Well, it could be for safety. It could be for finances. Could be for your ability to navigate and get around. Transportation, or, availability of getting just to your doctor appointments and to the grocery store. All of those could be leading into that. But it also could be that there's some new ideas coming out and going, what about house sharing? Or do we have the expectation in our family that it's going to be a multi-generational family? And if that's the case, do I need to remodel my home?
Yeah, how do you prepare your home for you to continue to live in as you age?
Right. Or, do I have to go get a permit from the city so I can put in a tiny home in my backyard? I mean, there's a lot of things that come from that conversation. Or the one I love talking about a lot is the co-sharing, or co-housing, which is where an older family member or a senior could invite a young family to, let's say, live on one floor of their home. And then they have that interaction with the young family. The young family then has a great place for their kids to play because there's a backyard and access to schools. And all of a sudden it's like, there's a solution to a problem we didn't know we maybe would have had to address, versus saying I have to move out of my home, move into that next level of that apartment, or that, if you can find a one-level living condo, that's awesome, but they're hard to come across. So as things change, are there different ways that we can solve those questions that do come up?
So that important conversation, we keep referring to that, and I think it's a great term for it, has a myriad of topics in it. It can be complex. It has different modes, different levels. Now, do you have some tools that would help people to begin to think about having the conversation and to get their thoughts together and to plan on how to do this?
That was the reason why I wrote my first book.
Tell us about your books, Amy.
So once again, I have The Last Life Lesson. Oh, that looks nice. Which is a book that covers all the different topics. More people are surprised at how many topics, whether it's housing, finances, legal, that your care, your socialization, end-of-life planning. Also, if you're a veteran, or if you're aging alone as a solo, and then there's a chapter in there also for executors, how to close out someone's estate. So having those conversations, not only what are the options, but also what I have at the end of every chapter is a checklist. Mm-hmm. So in that checklist, we could be talking about different documents that you might need to collect, or what other papers that you might have in your paperwork. How do you pull that together? And then if people are interested in going to the level beyond just the book, which I call this the do-it-yourself, is I have what's called a legacy. Well, I probably shouldn't call it exactly a legacy box, but it's I could call it the black box of death if I wanted to.
Well, that's kind of a morbid title.
It is. But the idea is it's a file, a folder, one of those expandable folders, and in the first half is where you put all of your documents, and then the idea is this would go to your executor, and your executor then has it to fill out with all the documents you need after you pass away. People don't realize how much paperwork is involved when you close out an estate. But wouldn't it be nice to have a place for all of your housing and your passwords and your medical documents and receipts, and then when you're having to go through probate, You have all your tax filings and all of the other documents that you have to collect, your death certificates, those things that you may not think, oh my gosh, we have to collect all these. And to have that easily accessible for the person who you choose to close your estate out, it's a great way for them to just grab that and have everything they need.
We can't emphasize enough the importance of doing what you're explaining here, because at that crisis moment, that's when most people realize, oh, I need these documents and I need these decisions and I need to do this and I need to do that. And they don't know about it. They don't know where those documents are. They don't know the steps that they need to take. And it's a tremendous frustration to have to go through something like that. But if you have a tool that helps organize all of that information for you and put it in a place where the right people know where it is and how to get to it and how to use it, it just makes things so much simpler and much more rational.
Absolutely, and then people know what your wishes are. Truly, that's the main thing I'm trying to help people gather is what's important to you. How can we honor you and what you believe life and death should be? Everyone has a different idea of what that is. One of the things that actually brought me into doing this is when I saw how families acted when there wasn't a plan in place. And that would be the source of so many family disputes. And in some cases, the family members will never talk to each other ever again, which isn't that like the last thing that a person would want if their family members weren't talking anymore? Family is probably the most important thing we have in our lives. We might not like our family members, but having a family, be in connection with somebody, that is probably one of those, it's very, very important to who we are. So finding a way to make sure that everyone's working together as best as you can is really important.
It certainly is. I mean, I can envision a scenario where an aging parent has not left full instructions about what they want to have happen, and the children get in a heated discussion, an argument over, well, I think Dad wanted this, and the other child says, no, Dad wanted that, and that's how fractures erupt in families. And this whole process that you have really helps to avoid those kinds of situations.
Right, and oftentimes I talk to caregivers, and the caregivers are torn because they will see someone at their very last moments of life and they hear the family members fighting over what to do. And for them, it is probably the most traumatic part of their job is going, how do we make these last moments be for your loved one, not be about sibling rivalry or misunderstanding or a difference of opinion. But I'm also hearing some people's final wishes, for example, a funeral. They will, whether they're churchgoers or what's important to them, their children will say, I'm not comfortable with that, so we're going to do this. When in fact, was that really what their loved one would want? But unless it's written down, it's hard to say.
Yeah, exactly. It leads to arguments. One of the areas that your do-it-yourself book includes here, I have to ask this. Does it ask for people to put down their passwords?
I do have a password list, and it's really important that you do passwords. And
it absolutely is. I mean, and that's often overlooked.
Yes. Well, and it's something that changes all the time, right? So how do you stay on top of it?
To stay secure.
Well, one of the most fascinating things that happens, is your password to your cell phone, your password to your computer. If you do not have that, which is a source of so much, you have to go get a court order in order to get access to that. And if you have not been identified as the person to have that because no will or testament, that's time and money and anxiety, all because there wasn't that information shared. So having a password list is really great. Another one is knowing where the safety deposit box key is, because you have to go to the bank, and the bank, you have to get an order in order to get the bank to drill a hole in the safety deposit box. When all the time there was just a key, just you need to know where it was. And make sure that you're the person that's authorized to access that box. So it's getting these things put in place ahead of time, so others, not just your family members, but other people that support your life, your banker, your doctor, your people who come and provide services to you, they know who they can talk to. And so it's important to have those things put aside. Otherwise, yeah, it's more time in the courts, time where you're just dealing with things that...
As trivial as the issue of passwords may seem,
Yes.
this is probably one of the most important points that you're making in our program today.
Right.
Is that kind of detail, that level of completeness about knowing how to access information and how to use it is so critical.
Right.
So that important conversation, you gave us some ideas about how to start it, when might be a good time to start it. Do you have any suggestions about things not to do? Do not do this to start the conversation.
Well, I'd say don't do it over Thanksgiving dinner. Sometimes it makes sense to have this conversation when you are in a relaxed environment. It could even be, you're taking a drive somewhere. I mean, I know that was always the time I had my conversations with my kids, because it's kind of a more relaxed place than, while you're waiting in line at the grocery store. Having some information already identified, or maybe there's a news story or a podcast that you've listened to that you can share, so you both can kind of come from the same place and then go, okay, what were your thoughts about this topic? Or if you hear of a neighbor or a family friend who maybe made plans or didn't make plans, and then you see what the repercussions are, you can go, how would you handle that question? How would you handle what to do? And then listen and ask clarifying questions and try to take yourself out of it. And that's why I like calling this the last life lesson, because it's how would you like me to treat you? Not how would I like to treat you, but what would honor you? And if you have that mindset, that conversation can go a lot smoother than if I'm trying to say, well, you have to do things my way.
Yeah. Listening sometimes is the hardest part of the conversation, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Amy, you told us about the workbook tool that you have here. You have a second book that you brought along. Would you share with our viewers what that one is?
So this one's called Aging in Place Conversations, and I worked on this with about 20 other authors from around the country, all industry experts, and it's through the National Aging in Place Council. So the purpose of this book is for those who are looking to age in place. Now, to define aging in place, it's anywhere that you live. So it could be that you're in assisted living, but the idea of what do you need to know to be prepared. So this was an excellent opportunity to partner with some of the nation's best thought leaders in this aging conversation, and to share some new ideas, but also to get access to the current topics that are out there. And in here, there's a lot of QR codes, which will connect you right to websites and sources of documents that you might need, no matter what state you live in, because each state has a different set of guidelines.
What a terrific resource, a great tool. So if our viewers would like to get copies of these books, how do they do that?
So the Aging in Place Conversations, because it's through National Aging in Place Council, is available on Amazon. I believe it's $15. So if you search aging, it should come up in one of the top searches. The Last Life Lesson is a product I provide. It's my workbook that I provide with my clients, but also for those who are interested, they can find it right on my website at ourfamilyencounter.com.
And that information has been scrolling on the screen for us while we're having our conversation. That's great. In our previous conversation, you used a term and you talked a little bit about it, what I thought was really fascinating, and maybe we have just a minute or two to spend on the forgotten middle.
Yes.
Tell us, what is the forgotten middle?
So I define it as it's more of a financial, but I also find it's also a freedom, a personal freedom space. When you think of aging in place, a lot of the conversations are for those who are on Medicare, medical support, the county. So there's a lot of resources for those who are low income. I'd say what I'd count for maybe 20% of the population, of the senior population. On the other end of the spectrum are those who have a lot of money, I'd say 2 million plus, set aside or more, and they can get all the guidance and the advice that they might need, and retirement will not be an issue for them because they can pay for the services they want. I would put the ranges around $50,000 to potentially as much as $2 million saved for retirement. This includes all property, assets, everything. It's what I call the forgotten middle, and it means that they may or may not have enough to have a full retirement.
Our guest has been Amy Miller of Our Family Encounter. Thank you, Amy, for sharing with us today the work that you've done in this area. You have a lot of good suggestions and a lot of reasons why people need to have that important conversation. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Access to Democracy.